Hello, everybody. Thank you, Joe. Hi, my name is Tom. Good evening. Thanks for joining. You can see slides, right, Joe? It's all good.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, cool. So I'll crack straight on. So you should be able to see a picture of me. Just shout if not. So this is a talk about coaching orienteering. So my job, I am basically. I can never actually remember what my proper job title is. But I am the coach that is employed by British Orienteering. There's only one of us, and I'll explain a bit more about how it works. So if you don't know me, in this photograph, I'm the one in the bottom right. This was us at JWOC earlier. No, last summer. Joe, is that coming up all right for you? Because this picture is really pixelated for me.
I can see the picture of yourself at the moment.
Yeah.
That looks all right on my end. Can
you see a map on that one? As you can actually read a map.
I can indeed. It looks clear, but my map knowledge might not be as good as many others are.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about tonight, because I sort of was a bit like, I don't really know kind of what exactly everyone will want to know about. So I'm assuming as orienteers, we'll have a lot of stuff about maps, because this is the stuff that always engages all the athletes. So there's got 4 different things on the topic tonight. I'll talk a bit about the program, how big it is, who works in it, that kind of stuff. A little bit about the athletes, and then kind of like just some of my thoughts on coaching and what I've learned, and some ideas on kind of like what I would like to see in the future. I've got some extra bonus material kind of into 2 parts. We'll see how we're doing for time. I'm going to try and talk for about 45 minutes, 40 minutes. But if there's time, there's kind of like more material, which is more kind of more map stuff, more about how we actually teach the orienteering to the athletes, which we'll see how interested people are. So introduction to the performance program, British Orienteering. So I'm sure there is more stuff, and our strategic plan is obviously bigger than this, but I kind of see 2 key roles. It's like development and performance. But the role of British Orienteering is to get people out there, get them orienteering, and then I work in a much smaller part of British Orienteering, which is about supporting the national team. So why do we have a national team? It's like we want to inspire our next generation. We want to take the very best orienteers in Britain and race against the others in the world. But these kind of like these 2 are linked, and in British Orienteering, there's about 8, 9 people who work in development, and there's only 2 of us at the moment in performance. So it just kind of gives an idea of the split. This is how our performance program is structured. So if you go onto the website, there's actually a lot more information than this, and it looks a lot better than my shabby table. But we work in 5 levels. So you can see those there. And then the ones that sort of get the support from British Orienteering, also kind of like levels 3, 4, and 5. So we split out by age. So we've got slightly different names. A lot of other nations use the names of youth, junior, and senior squads. But I think a lot of other nations are kind of going to a similar structure to us. So a few years ago, we moved away from having junior and senior squads, and we've kind of created a 3rd squad in the middle, which is development. The motivation for this is that, as I'm sure a lot of you will recognise, there's a lot of good junior orienteers in Britain, but we tend to lose them. We tend to lose them at key transitions in their life, when they're going to university, but especially when they're graduating. And so that's kind of like the idea behind the development squad, is that we're giving opportunities, we're giving social structure, we're giving orienteering opportunities and coaching to like sort of people who are leaving university, and at that point we are helping them stay in the sport and want to be elite athletes. So my job, where I spend a lot of my time, is working with these 26 athletes who are sort of university age. Some are kind of doing their A levels, some have recently graduated, but it's mainly that kind of age group. But as I am sort of the only paid up coach within British Orienteering, I also do a lot of support with the level 5. So this is our senior squad. So this is like your Megan Carter Davis, the Ralph Streets. These are the guys who are going to WOCs and the World Cups. We have some fantastic other stuff that work in performance. So we have a great chap who is a volunteer, Andy Kitchen, who is an ex-GB runner, sort of like from the 80s, who volunteers. And then we're very lucky. We have a guy called Emil Wingstead, who, if you don't know Emil, multiple Swedish world champion in the early 2000s. Like, if he's been there, he's won it pretty much in every discipline, and he knows what he's talking about. And so Emil just kind of like brings that extra top level about what it takes to win on the biggest stage. So we're really lucky to have Emil working with us. And then I work really closely alongside a lady called Rachel. Rachel Handley does a lot of our support, especially for the level 5 squad. So she does a lot of the administration support. So there's a lot of effort that she does to make the whole program work. So in numbers, there's close to sort of about 100 athletes in level 3, 4, and 5. These are numbers from last year. We've made it very slightly smaller for 2024. And in last year, we put on 16 training camps for level 4 and 5. So that's covered like everybody ages 19 and above. And that we put teams out to 8 competitions. So that's senior and junior competitions. And those competitions and the training camps draw very heavily. It's not just me, Emil, Andy Kitchen staffing them. We draw very heavily on volunteers as well. So last year we used 22 different coaches from different regions. So if you're interested in ever being involved with the squad, drop me an email. Always interested to talk to people. I kind of put just a little bit about budget in here, just to kind of like to say that it's not huge. Pretty much everything that we put in, the athletes have to pay for as well. So if you're opening up Compass Sport and you're reading, oh, I've seen this athlete has gone to this competition, kind of you won't have seen all the stuff that goes behind the scenes of that, how much the athletes had to pay for that. And kind of like how costly the sport is just for them. It's not just for us. The overall kind of like philosophy behind the program really is going orienteering. We are orienteers. We want to go orienteering. It's give people opportunities. There's a reason why there's 16 training camps. That sounds like a lot for kind of like everybody ages 19 and above, but that's because we're dealing with different groups. We're dealing with sprinters, we're dealing with forest orienteers, we're dealing with athletes who are trying to get into their first JWOC, all the way up to WOC gold medalists. So there's sort of like different things that have different focus for different athletes. But the nice thing is across the program, we try to be kind of like create those opportunities and be really transparent, and just everybody is invited to everything. So a large part of this is kind of like we want the athletes to be mixing. We want a young and upcoming 18, 19-year-old to be training alongside the senior squad that are going to WOC. We want that kind of like that interaction, the internal competition going on within the squad. We want that learning to be happening. And kind of like my main aim isn't necessarily about like WOC medals. It's like great WOC medals or results at World Cups are fantastic, and they're kind of like they are something that show that the program is working. But really, my main aim is to create athletes that love orienteering and want to train hard. They would need to train at a senior level. You need to be training kind of like in the region of about 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week to be fit enough and to be technically good enough. And that's a lot of time. We're talking sort of like 2 hours plus per day, and that's training time. That doesn't include all the travel, all the showering, all the food, all the faff of being able to train twice a day. So we try and create athletes that sort of like they want to have dual careers. They love orienteering enough that they're willing to take a lot of unpaid leave, put all their spare money into doing it, and they think it's rewarding. So I've kind of like got just one slide here really about like what do the athletes do? It's called, yeah, they have to love orienteering, and it's that feeling. Everybody has that feeling. I think hopefully everyone in this call of running into rain, and when you feel like you're on rails, you know exactly where you're going, and the map just makes sense, and everything is just kind of like unfolding before you, and you're expecting to see that little knoll, you're expecting to see that boulder, and they just pop up in front of you, and then when you see that control feature and just like, I know my control is behind that hill over there, and there it is. And that's the thing that even the very world's best, when you're around in an arena at world champs, you'll hear them that they are super keen. They're everybody loves orienteering, and it's that kind of feeling that we wanna well, not forget. So you can't just turn up to an international. Like going to an international race is slightly different to going to just a domestic race, and the athletes have to put a lot of time in. They have to do a lot of preparation for these races. So this is stop there. This is an example of like the level of preparation that elites are putting in to their races. So something that I talk about with our junior athletes, especially, is about having a game plan. It's about when you're standing in the start box, it's like, what are the 2 simple things that you are going to do today? So it's like, how do you navigate on this area? What makes this area special? So these 2 simple things could be, I ran the BK event at Barossa at the weekend. Felt like my game plan going into that's like, right, I'm going to be really strong on the veg boundaries because there's a lot of different little copses all over this army area, and I'm going to be on my compass. Everything, the compass is going to be in the lead position. So it's like compass, veg boundaries, and it's having something really simple that you believe in and that you can come back to, and it's kind of like suits your technique and suits the area that you're running on. And it takes a lot of work to get to something that an athlete really believes in. So this quote here is from Matthias Kibberts. This is the kind of like the game plan that he took into last summer's WOC middle race. So if you haven't seen the map, that's a map excerpt from the WOC middle race. Absolutely crazy technical terrain. I've run on this. It's very difficult. It's physically difficult, but it's also very technically difficult. You just get pushed around a lot. So all of these kind of like these little features are actually very, very large, and you see it's very hard to run straight in this terrain. And Kibberts described his game plan. He's like, I want to be like Pac-Man. I want to be eating up the features as I go along. Every little feature is like a little dot in Pac-Man, and I'm always going to be in complete contact. And that was what worked for him. But it takes a long time, or it takes a lot of work for an elite to get to that level of having a game plan that they really believe in. So I've kind of pinched these from talks I saw the Swiss head coach give, and this was kind of the 4-year lead into WOC 2023. So this was their home WOC, and how they designed this game plan for their athletes. So sort of back in 2021, they were kind of like they were out running on similar areas, doing similar training courses, and this picture here of all the post-it notes. This is kind of all the stuff when they come off from an event. It's like, how do you navigate here? What are the techniques that you should be focusing on? And you can see some little map excerpts in the top right of when they were taking this from. And then back in, so a year before the event at 2023, this picture here in the bottom right, they're doing some route analysis, and it's looking at like, okay, this was warm-up competition, and this was comparing the routes of one of the Swiss runners with Tove Alexandersson, a multiple Swedish world champion. It's kind of like, where are these sections? Where are these little sections where I am losing time, and why is that happening? And so it's kind of like it's understanding how to run, not just navigate in these areas, but how to race them as fast as possible. And that is the job of the coach. The job of the coach is to help the athlete develop that confidence and that game plan for their own navigation style so that they can tackle an international race. And I'll come back to this picture and we'll talk a bit more about it as we go on. So I'm just going to talk a bit about like my reflections on coaching. So orienteering is 100% a learnable skill. The brain is a muscle. If you practice purposefully how to navigate, you can get better at it. And it's all about attitude. And this is something we talk about a lot with the athletes. It's kind of like learn to do it well, learn to do it consistently, and then you can learn to do it fast. And if you do the same thing, you will always get the same results. If you always go to a Sunday event and you're doing the same thing and using the same orienteering techniques as you were 20, 30 years ago, then you'll be in the same place and probably sit in the same place in results. But if you practice and you think about how you're practicing, you can definitely get better at navigating. So what we use in the squad and kind of like what the athletes get taught from quite a young age as juniors is a simple model. So this is the model that we use. It's called plan, direction, picture. And I'll explain a bit more about where this comes from. But by having a simple model, this means that we can kind of standardize the language that we are using with the athletes. So this is something that I did with a bunch of junior athletes a couple of months ago. So this is a word cloud. It's had 188 responses. So this is asking them kind of what are all the different things, different techniques that you've heard of how to navigate. So there's some really good stuff in here that I'm sure you've heard of. So bearings, compass, traffic lighting. There's always a few that come up from junior athletes. You're just like, thanks for that. So like following James, that's probably not a great, that it is a tactic, but it's not a particularly useful tactic because James is not always going to be around. But if you're doing some coaching, I really recommend this as a good icebreaker at the beginning of a session, because it always generates conversation. Because no matter how many times I've done this, there's always something new and something weird, and you get into a conversation with someone where you're like, just like, what's someone written in here? Pick one out. I'm just like, what is you might be like, what are focus words? And you're just like, what do you mean by that? Who wrote that? And then you can get into a conversation like, oh, is this some kind of like navigation thing that we've not heard about before? And yeah, I just think it's a great exercise. So I then go and type all of those onto a slide. So there's lots of jargon. Like this is kind of part of the problem with orienteering, is that there's loads of stuff that we use, loads of language that we use to describe navigating. And this can be really daunting if you're trying to think like, not only have I got to try and learn all these different tools, but it's like, when do I ever choose? Like which tool do I pick to use and when? And the idea of like the plan, direction, picture is that actually all of these things are just kind of like subcategories of plan, direction, picture, distance. Like these are there are basically only 4 techniques, and everything else is just a subcategory of that. So if somebody's kind of like says, oh, control flow, that's my technique. It's like, well, that isn't actually a technique. That's an outcome of you orienteering well. That's like saying my technique is to go win. It's like, well, you can't win. You win because you navigate well, you run fast, you have good speed control, and the rest of the field went as fast as you today. So having this kind of standardized, simple model, plan, direction, picture, talk about distance, it's really useful because it means that when you're actually trying to give an orienteering lesson, then you've got a common language. But when the athlete is in the forest, they only have to think about two things. It's like, do I have a plan? And then how am I executing that plan? So I'll come on to what these words mean a bit, because you might not recognize everything in here. So like how I got a plan, and when I'm executing it, basically you've got direction, which is compass mainly, or you've got picture, which is map features. So in one slide, this is how you orienteer pretty much. So this map sample here is from an EYOC in Hungary in 2022. So I'm sure as orienteers, you see this, you stop listening to me, you're already looking at the map going, oh, that looks like an interesting lake, 9 to 10. What would I do? So the first thing you do is you read the map. And on the run, like this is something we don't talk about enough, I don't think, but it's like, how do you take information off the map? The next step, step 2, is pick a route. So this leg particular 9 to 10 is just like, which way are you going? There's this great big slope here in red, I've just drawn, that doesn't look great. So there's a few different routes you could take. You could go down low, hug the fence, come up at the end. That's one route. You could try and go as straight as possible, but that looks pretty horrible because there's a lot of green in the second half. It looks very steep. It's going to be slow. Or you can climb up high, run across the tops of the hills, run down this final spur, and then onto the control there. So that isn't a plan, that is a route. That is which route are you taking, and that will be different for each individual athlete. Like what are your strengths? Are you a better track runner than in the forest, and what are your navigational strengths? So let's just leave the route that goes over the top of the hill. And then it's kind of like, right, we have to turn this into a plan. So we talk with the athletes about beacon features. So these are big, obvious features that you can simplify to, and basically you try and leapfrog between the beacon features, and you need those for the whole leg to pass it. So number 9, the first beacon feature could be, I'm going up the slope. I'm going up it straight. I'm going up this an angle. I'm going up this slope as straight as possible. Next beacon feature is like these power lines. I'm going to follow the edge of the power lines until I want to get. I'm going to kind of like tick off the top of this reentrant. So that's a native beacon feature. But I will go to the top of this big hill. Hopefully my highlighting is in yellow as kind of turning up on your screens. And then my next beacon feature is I'm going to run to the end of this spur, like this big spur. And this spur is also giving me direction. So this is why we call it direction and not just compass, because this feature is pointing at the control. If you didn't have a compass, you could still get from these power lines to number 10 because the hill is giving you direction. And then it's right. Okay, I need to know from the top of the hill. I would like to come off the very top of the hill, take a bearing. And that's my plan. I'm going to take a bearing out of control and get my eyes up. And there's kind of this final step, which is you're going into the control. We talk about the last beacon feature being that's your attack point, and you want to have a better picture of the control circle. Because these beacons are a good way to simplify, but when you're actually going into the circle, you need to know what feature you're looking for. So reading the map. This is the most crucial skill. And this can definitely be practiced. And I think a lot of it comes down to we're trying to teach athletes and give them opportunities to practice taking information from the map in chunks, often glances, while they're on the run. So while we are looking at this map now, so this is leg 5 to 6 from the middle course. Both the men and women had it at JWOC in 2023. So this is Romania. Like this is quite unrealistic. We've already looked at this map like way longer than you would probably look at this in a competition. And so you need to practice being able to take information in glances. And it's asking these questions like, what's the route? Like there are 2 kind of main routes here. It's like going straight, control as straight as possible, or it's, well, actually, I've skipped forward actually. What you should do is just like, what's the big shape? Like in one glance, probably the first thing you see is like, there's this massive slope. for number 6, and there's sort of like a corner here. So the big shape is like, oh, I'm on top of a hill, I'm gonna have to run down the big slope at some point to get to 6. Then it's like, okay, which route is that? There's the going straight route, or there's the, oh, I don't like that slope at the end, that looks very steep, I'm going to go to the path, and then the right route, using it there. So let's say we pick the right route, and I mean, I can tell you that from seeing the results this summer, both routes were viable. Athletes ran fast times on both routes, so it's kind of playing to your own individual strengths. But if you want to run the right route, it's okay, well, I'm taking a bearing out of the control, so I need to really get that bearing here to get that right. And the beacons are, it's like, I want to check off the top of this reentrant, I want to get onto the path, and then when the end of the slope finishes and all like these root stocks finish at the end here, that's the point where I'm going to take a bearing. So it's like simplifying to just these few big obvious features allows you to be fast because you don't have to read everything else. And then the final picture is, are my controls on a rootstock? And this is where you check your control description, right? I'm visualizing a rootstock and the control is on that side. And so when you're taking this final bearing, you're not just on the compass blindly, you're on the compass expecting to see a rootstock. I'm going to see if this will work. So this is a YouTube video of Toby Alexanderson, so one of the most successful orienteers of all time, running in Spain, in sand dunes. So we show this to the juniors just to kind of like illustrate this point of how many times she's reading the map. So if I just go back to the start slightly, so you can see 2 hands reading the map there. She's reading the map again there, reading the map still. Well, she's running along the side of this big spur, this big hill. So yeah, there's plenty of dead running here where she can push, which is like, I know where I'm going. And then she's getting to the end of this spurt. There's more map reading, more reading the map, 2 hands holding the map so that she can get a really good proper look at it. And then it's map away. One final check there. Final check there, and drops into the control. And why do we use this? It's like, it's to make the point of like reading the map a lot is one of the key skills. Plan, direction, and picture is a really good model, but it only works if you choose to look at the information in your hand. Something Emil talks about, which is a really good point, is in Sweden, they get taught kind of like, you will be reading the map every 10 seconds. You'll be looking at the map. And every time you're looking at the map, kind of like in this picture in the bottom right hand here, it's kind of like you've got the compass just there in the background. So in your peripheral vision, you've got this directional backup. And when you really start thinking about this and you start doing this technique of kind of like having the compass all the time running, you can catch a lot of errors before they become proper errors, because you just realize it's like, oh, I'm just heading off in kind of like 30 degrees in the wrong direction. What am I doing? What am I doing? I need to pull right, or I need to pull left. So yeah, this is an example of, I read the map a lot. So this is what we do a lot with the athletes. It's kind of what we put up maps, annotate it. This works kind of worse on Zoom or Teams. This works better in a classroom when you can get someone up and give them pens and put it on a whiteboard and get them to circle stuff. But this particular leg, this is the same JWOC course from Romania. So it's read the map. What's like, what are the big shapes? Well, the first thing you see, it's like, okay, well, there's this great big slope in front of me and there's a big veg boundary behind. Like, what are the biggest features? You want to make a plan. You want to pick the route, make the plan. Like, what are those beacons in between? And then it's deciding how are you going to leapfrog, how are you going to execute to get between those beacons. So we use this to show how this is an example of, right, I've decided the route. There's no reason why I can't run straight. Looks like nice white forest. Good. And the beacons, it's only first thing is coming out of control. This could be a steep slope. Go look up to see a clearing, and then the final attack point is coming off the corner of the clearing. So simplifying a leg into just a few steps. And then it's a couple like annotated to show like these are two techniques. Either you're on the compass using direction, or you're on the features. And this is something that we get athletes to do when they're doing the prep. So say they'd never been to Romania before, when we're trying to prepare for a championships. This is the type of stuff that we'd get them to do. So to give them courses, but it's not just look at the course. To get them to draw on the course, get them to think about like, okay, what beacons am I picking? Which routes would I pick? And then it's really useful to get the team to talk to each other and be like, okay, well, why did you pick that one? Why did you pick this one? And we kind of start doing this slow time. They've got loads of time to read the map, but then you want to bring this into a running situation where they've got to be looking at the map in glances. A second point here is kind of like this kind of like graph that I've sketched out. Is about, you don't need to be focused to execute, not 100% of the time anyway. You do need high focus at different points. There are times when you can have low focus and you can just be thinking about running or anything else, but you don't need to have full concentration for the full leg. So generally, it's like when you get to your various beacons, whatever you picked that they are. So I've labeled them with little stars on this map. That's the point where it's like you need to slow down a bit, you need to have a bit more focus, and you need to do the right thing. So say, for example, you get to the first beacon, which was this steep slope. It's like, if you don't check the compass there, as you're sort of coming off the compass and looking across the valley to look out for the big clearing behind, if you don't do that there, then you could end up coming off in slightly the wrong direction. You could come off over here. You haven't checked your direction, or you come off the left. And so it's these kind of like beacons are the critical points when you've got to be doing some active navigating. So it's just in one slide, there's something that we'd have to show the athletes. Probably the beginning and end of a presentation like this would be read the map, pick a route, make the plan, use direction and picture to leapfrog between your beacons, and you kind of like add a bit more control into that final control circle. So it's this is our simplified model of how to navigate that we are teaching. So that's great. The coach understands that really well. It doesn't really matter if I understand that theory and I'm like, great, I can like plan direction, picture the life out of any orienteering area. I know exactly what I'm doing. What doesn't matter what's in the coach's head. What matters is in the athlete's head. And if your athlete comes up with their own theory, whatever they want to call it, that's brilliant. You want the athlete to own their own kind of like their own game plan for that particular race. And that's not a linear process. It takes a lot of work and a lot of back and forth. And this kind of like what this diagram, the bottom left, is supposed to be showing. It's like, as a coach, you've got to try and find different ways to talk to different people and try and just give the same lesson in various different ways, and to try and find a way that will chime with the athlete and what works for them. And what works for one athlete might be a completely different way that you would talk to another athlete. There are some athletes that love all of this theory stuff and they want to talk about it. And before they're going out, they want to come up to the coach in quarantine or at pre-start before they start. And they want to be like, Tom, today I'm going to be really focused on my game plan and what I've got in there. I've got like, I've been really thinking about always having a plan, and I'm always going to have an exit direction when I leave a control. And that's what I'm doing. And I want to talk to you about it now. And I want to talk to you about it at the end of the course because I want to be accountable. There are other athletes that just like, I just want to go orienteering, and they've built this stuff in, and it's sort of autopilot now. So you've got to know your audience. You've got to know when you want to talk about this stuff. But these sort of getting from the coach's head into the athlete's head, there's a lot of different routes to do that, and it's not linear. And these are the sorts of things that probably as a coach, as an athlete, this is what you'll be thinking. So this is just kind of like my reflection on what I'm trying to think. So before a race, you want to make your athletes feel confident. So if this is kind of like we're going after a championships, we're just talking about a lot of positives, and we're talking about facts. So AP in this slide is a tap point. So that's the training diary that a lot of our athletes are using. So if you can point to the athlete's training diary and you can say, well, we came on a training camp here 6 months ago and you were nailing this terrain and you know how to do it. You know how to navigate in this terrain. That's a great confidence boost because they can't argue with that. Just telling them that they're going to do a good job, I mean, that doesn't have quite the same power. But before a race, you want to be really helping your athletes to feel as positive about their own navigation as you possibly can. And as positive about their own physical training as you possibly can. And then after a race, how really helps me with coaching is using this PDP, this plan direction picture, like by having the same sort of like simple language that when an athlete is saying, they come talk to you at the end of the race and they will be talking about what they did, or at the end of an exercise, even on a training camp, it's like you're talking the same language. One of the best things that I ever learned, which was probably from Keith Marsden about 15 years ago when I started volunteer coaching at Lag and Lear, was you want to ask open questions. You're trying to get the athlete, you can't really get inside their head, you're trying to get them to coach themselves. So asking open-ended questions, that's your main weapon as a coach. And my favorite question is, what was your plan? And all my athletes kind of know that it's coming, and it's still super helpful because you can talk to an athlete after a race and they'll just be saying, this happened, da 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 da. And you just ask the question, what was your plan? And it has the power to really change a conversation because they stop talking about what they did and then they start talking about what they were planning to do and how they approached it, which is so much more important. It's like it doesn't matter whether they lose 10 seconds or 10 minutes after they make a mistake. It's like you want to, as a coach, try and help them identify their mistakes and then see if there are patterns there and then help them with exercises that improve their technique in that area. And you don't get that from an athlete if you're just letting them talk forever about their course without kind of like the occasional prompt of like, okay, I want to talk about, but what were you trying to do? What was your plan? No one cares about the coach. Like it's all about the athlete. And I mean, it's hard for a coach. I think it's hard for everybody, but it's just kind of like the athlete doesn't care that you made a similar mistake at your color-coded event the week before or not. It's sort of like they want to know how is this going to help them. And also just knowing your timing of when to ask these questions is really important. So generally anything that athlete says in the arena after a race, generally you don't pay very much attention to it. They're emotional, they haven't thought through everything. And it's just, you need to talk to them, of course, and you want to like listen to them and be a sounding board. And that's a big part of like the support role of being a coach. But it's actually after they've got changed and had a chance to warm down and eaten some food, that's a really good point to talk to them. And that's when you actually start to get a few nuggets about like, okay, but what happened? Why did it happen? what did you do well that we can do more of tomorrow? What did you do not so well that we can improve on? So it's got like one opportunity that I think is really golden, which is kind of like after they've cooled down. And I think there's a second one, which is a few days later when they've gone away, they've thought about it, they've looked at all the GPS tracers, they've done the full post-mortem in splits and root gadget. That's kind of like something else might have come up in their mind where they're like, oh, okay, right, I'm this part of the splits, I noticed this about my run and I want to talk about it. And it's really useful, like, to talk about this. Like, that's probably that is obviously your main communication technique with the athletes. But I really strongly encourage athletes when they have these realizations about their own technique, that they write it in a tack point, they write it in their training diary, that they're capturing it, so they're not having to relearn these lessons next time. And that's just as important with stuff that they're doing well, so they can look back and be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I absolutely nailed my route choices today, or I nailed my bearings, or whatever it is that they know. So that green box is kind of like what is going through my head when working with an athlete a lot of the time. And then the athlete kind of this is my thoughts on what they're thinking. It's like they just want to know that you care, and they want to know that you can improve them. So definitely a big part of my role is listening to athletes talk, and then maybe going like, okay, you said all of these things, and they'll say, I don't know, I'm having real difficulties with like from the final attack point into the control. Like I'm not in compact enough. I keep making errors in that final bit. And that's when they want the coach to step in and kind of like come up with an idea. So if you can be like, what you need is a corridor exercise, and we're going to set it up like this so that you can practice being in real full contact for a whole course rather than just like 10 seconds every leg. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for ways that you can improve them. And so as a coach, that's kind of like you've got to keep working to make sure that you've got a lot of tools, a lot of ideas for exercises, or we don't know everything, that you've got contacts that you can reach out to talk to other coaches, to other support staff, to make things happen, to try and help the athlete improve whatever it is that you guys identify together. So this the last bit of the presentation now, just looking towards the future and what I think it probably looks like, or what I'd like to see for British Orienteering. So probably like our biggest challenge is funding. We're a really small program compared to the nations that we're trying to compete against, and costs are going up a lot. So every time we go to a competition or to a training camp, kind of a lot of our costs are accommodation, and entry fees we'll come back to, but like food, hire cars, flights. This is what the athletes are spending their money on, and inflation just makes everything more expensive. There's another point around just like the IOF entry fees for competitions are very expensive, and while sort of like as an orienteer myself, I might be, I don't know, say to my wife, going to an event, it's like £20 for the like local level B event this weekend. That seems expensive. Or the JK be like, oh, it's £25 this year. This seems like a lot of money, just because I'm an old orienteer and I remember back when it was like 10 quid. But an IOF entry fee, we're talking €300 for an athlete to attend a World Cup, to attend WOC. So we spend a lot of money just on entry fees entering a team. And that's the trend is that's going up. And I think it's kind of a reflection of the fact that the production quality of events is actually getting better and is really high. So the assembly areas are getting better. There's much more TV, there's much more live tracking, there are drones, there are running cameramen, but all of this stuff costs money. And events do get sponsors, but it costs a lot to put an event on. And so a lot of that cost actually gets passed on to the national teams. And just for a bit of context, kind of all the head coaches come together every once in a while, and I was lucky enough to go to a conference of about 10 head coaches from all the different nations in the summer, and we compared notes, and we just compared about how our different programs worked, and how we worked and what we did and how we were structured and who worked in it. And it's just really interesting to hear. It's like, wow, we really do put the least amount of money in compared to comparable nations. I think how we actually get by is that we're very lucky in Britain in that we have a lot of volunteer support, which is different to a lot of other places, but I don't think we could survive without the huge contribution that volunteers make to our program. But money really does make a difference when we're trying to convince athletes to kind of like make a choice to have a dual career. And it's not, I'm not talking about paying the athletes, but I'm talking about the more, if the program was able to subsidize athletes more, then athletes would do more training. They would go to more competitions. But if we were to increase our program funding, that would need really to go through British Orienteering membership, and not everybody has the same views that I do about wanting to fund performance more in future. I just say, like most similar nations kind of like have more staff than we do. So I am full-time, and then Rachel that I work with works about 2 days a week. So we don't have really the support staff either. So we are busy, but we do try and do our best. But I'm not complaining. This is kind of like make the most of what we have, and we're in a unique situation, I think, with the brilliant volunteer support that we get. And then kind of like final slide from me. This is kind of like, this is what I would like to see if I was in charge of everything, where I would put my effort into. And this is written with a performance in mind, because that's my role. I'm British Orienteering coach, but I'd love to see clubs and regions like spending their money on more development. It's kind of, there are some clubs in the country that have club development officers, and I kind of see the work that they're doing, and I just think it's absolutely brilliant. And I just think more clubs should be thinking about that and how they can be reinvesting money that they're making from events, and putting that into their development to try and bring people into the sport. Kind of like the second point is linked to that, kind of more juniors. If there's more going into development, more for juniors. Like I see you go to a British or a JK relay and you just see the number of teams that SYO are putting out. Like whatever Pauline at SYO is doing, I'm not familiar with her, but she's doing a great job, because just more people coming into the sport, that's good for development, it's good for performance, it's good for everybody, because if the talent funnel is wider, we're capturing more people, that's going to help the British team in 10 plus years time. We're fishing from a bigger pool. And it's really interesting to hear what Hungary as a nation are doing. They are investing a lot of money into their juniors, to the point where, like at the national championships in Hungary, they have 100 M14s and 100 W14s racing. Like their junior classes are massive, because they've put lots and lots of efforts into a schools program, and then kind of like getting those schools to then turn into regular schools runners, turn into regular club runners. And so while the Hungarians, if I go back a slide, are definitely behind us in the league tables at the moment, like give it 10 years and they'll be a force to be reckoned with. I'd like to see kind of like elites involved in planning. So this is kind of like, how can we involve elites in making UK events better? And so it's kind of like the manpower of our fantastic retired volunteers who are kind of the backbone of clubs. A lot of them are no longer running M21 Elite. And so quite a few courses that you run are they're just a bit too easy, or they're just a bit too samey, and they don't really replicate what just the planning style that you might get at internationals. And so it's not really saying we need any more of anything, but it's just an extra tweaking of events. And when you see the high quality UK events that are really designed at elites, you get like Lakeland Warrior, you get a lot of elites wanting to go to them. I think that's how you attract a lot of that 21 cohort. Love to see some more training put out for the sort of 21 to 40 age group. So if you're not familiar, Scottish Elite Development Squad sets, check out their Facebook page. Like Scottish Orienteering are doing a really fantastic job there. Drongo as a club, like for holding on to people, making it fun, giving them opportunities. I'd love to see kind of like more of that work. I'm trying to expand that across the UK, and that's really important because at the moment, if you're a young 20-something and you've gone from being in a GB squad, but you're not quite wanting to do a full dual career, and you're not fully wanting to put all your eggs into the orienteering basket, that's perfectly fine. But at the moment, kind of, if that means that you step out of the squad, there isn't anything necessarily for you. And that means these athletes, they lose a lot of the social interaction if they've been used to going on tour every year, if they've been used to training camps, and then there's suddenly nothing. That's when they kind of like fade away. And then the other bits you can probably read yourself, but like one of the thing I think would be really great to see is clubs kind of like being more open with their OCAD files, because it's really hard as a 21 elite to try and train in the UK sometimes, and like trying to just take barriers away to make that happen and to help people get onto areas where they do have land access. I know that is an issue, but where you are allowed to go onto parts of an area or all of an area because it's open to the public, then something that the clubs can be doing to really help their elites are sharing those OCAD files. But yeah, there's just more choice and everyone's better connected. So we've got to kind of move with the times, but that's just my view. I think I will stop there. So if you've got any questions, please stick them in the chat, and thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tom, for talking on that. That was brilliant. I was sat, I've kind of caught myself sat just like staring, listening to it like it was a podcast. Maybe not just staring through the screen, but just listening everything through. It was really, really interesting. And yeah, it's good to have such an insight on what we can all do really on the wider side for performance as well. Obviously, knowing how much work you put in alongside Rachel as well, it's really good to know what clubs can take back as well. And this slide especially, it's good almost like a little crib sheet of some suggestions obviously from yourself, but what we can look at. So to just go over once again what I briefly spoke about at the start for the Q&A. If you do have any questions, then feel free to pop them into the chat or into the Q&A section, and I'd be more than happy to get those over to Tom. Alternatively, you can raise your hand and I'll call upon you to unmute your microphone. You might have done it, Tom. You might have stunned them into silence.
Yeah. So
I'll sort of pose one to you. Obviously, I know you mentioned the social side of things, which is important when you've got these athletes coming through. I suppose just to link through to one of our other conference sessions that we had from SYO, that was talking about getting juniors in and the social side of that. So I guess can you just speak a little more, even just speak again, to the benefits of that social side when it comes to, I guess, the target of keeping these orienteers within the sport and building on that.
Yeah, so orienteering is a fantastic sport, and it seems to attract kind of just nice people. I can almost everybody that I know through orienteering are just like decent, nice people, and kind of like friends that I made at sort of 14 going to a Lag and Lear tour. I'm still friends with some of those people now. And you really do make lifelong connections through the sport. And I would say if you're a junior and you've been used to having a lot of things kind of like given to you on a plate. So if your parents have always taken you to events at the weekend, but then your parents have taken you to junior regional squads, then at junior regional squads, you kind of like get that chance to start maybe going away with your friends and a bit of freedom away from the parents. And so I would say there's a lot of sort of 14, 16, 18-year-old juniors in the country that have a fantastic time. And what JROS do and what the regional squads do is fantastic. And I think that's a big reason of why we retain juniors and make it really fun. And I think I spoke a little bit about being in terrain and kind of like feeling like you're on rails and absolutely nailing a control. Yeah, that is a great feeling, and that is brilliant. But you might be orienteering only like 1 hour in the day, and that whole rest of the day you spend a lot of the time going to the event, talking to people, like being at the event before you start. Like on Sunday, I left my house to go to this event at like 9:30, and I wasn't back till like 4 p.m. And you just go like end up talking to a few people in the car park, and there's the driving there and the driving back. So if you've got the social side of you've got friends to go with, people to go with in the car, or you've got people to go with on a trip, or you've got people to like that and your mates in the assembly area, so you can compare routes with afterwards, or you can be like, oh, absolutely, like the map was shocking around here. What is going on here? And you can both have a good chat about that. There's these interactions that I think really keep people in the sport, because it's fun and we're humans. We want to have friends. We're a social group, and so it's a massive thing. I think it has to be considered of like how we retain people, and this is kind of why we've moved to this squad system where kind of a lot of the funding goes into the age group of 19 to 25, because when you're sort of leaving home to go to university and you start to have freedom, more freedom, and you start to have the ability to make a lot more choices about what you do with your time. It's not just because mum or dad are going to an event and so I'm going to go along too. There's a lot more competing things, and so you need that social, I think, to continue, especially because a lot of our juniors will be really used to having a lot of that. So they might be going on a JROS tour, they might be going on a regional squad tour, they might be seeing their friends at an event. So they might have something going on every few weeks. And then suddenly you're getting to the end of university, you graduate, and there's nothing at all. And so I think that's why something like SEDS are doing a great job having that sort of breathed life into it again. And it's something that I'm really conscious of, and why we try to make basically the GB squads as big as we physically can, because we want to give the opportunity to as many people as possible, because I don't know for certain who the next world champion, where they're going to come from. They might be a late bloomer, they might be somebody who no one takes like a particularly linear route through the sport where they're just winning at every age group, and it's really easy to pick the talent. And so being able to give people like as much opportunity to be part of the sport, I think is a really big part of what we need to do for our young adults and what we're trying to do.
Excellent. I lost my unmute key there for a second. No, that's brilliant, Tom. Thank you for talking a bit more about that. We have a question from Nick in the chat who asks, what different characteristics do you think an elite orienteer might have compared, say, with an elite track or road athlete?
It's a good question. I think there's a couple of bits on that. So if we just stick to physical, I think it's really hard to train for orienteering compared to perhaps just if you've got a track event, because orienteering, you've got to be good at a lot of things at the same time. So you've got to be good at strength work. You've got to be good at longer intervals. You've got to be good at the shorter intervals. You've got to have a turn of speed when you hit the path. You've got to be able to smash it through a bit of green bush when it's in front of you. It's sort of, orienteering isn't just run at one pace. So maybe if you're an elite marathon runner, and there's a lot of really exciting marathon times being done in super shoes at the moment. A lot of people are moving to the marathon, but it's kind of, if you know your lactate profile and you can hold at a particular pace, and you know it's like, right, well, I can run this at 340 pace, but if I drop to 335, I'm going to blow up. It's like, it's perhaps a bit more scientific and repeatable if you're like an athletics athlete, and they probably get a lot more testing. But we don't really go in particularly hard for things like lactate testing, because orienteering, you just got to be good at so many things. You've got to be jack of all trades. So physically, I think there are differences. Like we're just a bit slower and a bit stronger and a bit more well-rounded. But then just the whole navigation side, there's so much preparation work that goes into making a good championship run. So the team, by the time that we got to Denmark in 22 and we had that outstanding walk, that was off the back of, yes, these guys have been training since they were small kids, but then the kind of specialized training going into Denmark were about 5 camps where the athletes had come together to talk about what are the challenges going to be, how can we train, let's practice knockout training, let's practice head-to-head training, so that we can really put our skills under pressure, and it really exposes where you're weak. If you've seen somebody in front of you just sort of get that extra 5 meters on you, it's like that doesn't necessarily come out if you're just training on your own. And also just the amount of geeking, the hours and hours the team spent learning sections of the map, learning how to deal with Danish towns, practicing taking information from the map in a quick glance and seeing not just kind of like a jumble of the symbols, but putting it together and being able to chunk it. It's just incredible. And so I don't see, like, probably the only sport that actually does that kind of work is more American football. But the amount of paperwork and routines and I don't know what they call it, kind of like, they call it plays that they work and videotape. That's huge, and that's probably the sport that has a similar amount of technical side to it.
Excellent. Brilliant. One more question from Julia. How do you encourage athletes to develop strong psychological skills as well as the necessary fitness skills, etc.?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, I definitely think in orienteering you've got to have 3 things. You've got to have the physical side, you've got to have the navigation skills, and you've got to have the psychological skills. They're kind of the main big 3 things. What everybody is an individual. I think probably the most important thing that I'm just talking about the British squad as a whole, so me and the volunteer coaches that work with me, is have contact time with the athletes. So it's getting to know them. So I spend basically the 2 biggest jobs that I do are sort of arranging camps and competitions. So that could be anything from, I don't know, helping Rachel and we pick accommodation, or just picking, right, what's our timetable going to be this year? Where are we going to have the camps? What are we going to do? Who's going to help us? So organizing camps. And the other big part is talking to athletes. So I spend a lot of my time talking to athletes, getting to know them, just being a sounding board. I think 80% of my job almost is just turning up sometimes, because they want to have someone to talk to and go, I'm thinking about option A or B, and you go, well, have you thought about option Z? And they'd be like, but sometimes you do have that kind of impact, but other times it's just like, yeah, you know the answer. A lot of the time it's like, yeah, option A is the best one, crack on. And it's giving them that confidence. So I think the biggest thing that we can do, again, like the best psych skills, is being there and being interested and giving them coaches that going back to this slide, coaches that like they've got a lot of tools in the toolbox. So when the athlete is, like Jess Ennis is here, looking a bit puzzled and going, this is going wrong. I know it's going wrong, but I don't know what to do about it. The coach can think of a way to look at it in a different way, or it's like, let's do this kind of exercise, and that kind of exercise is going to be the one that builds your confidence and that skill in that area. On a more maybe like pointy way, we do have a bit of sports psych support in the program. It's not as big as it should be, but sort of a lot of the athletes in the squad go to Edinburgh, and this means we kind of get a bit of an overlap with some of their skills. So we've done things in the past where we've got, for example, we've got the sports psych support for the students in Edinburgh, which is about probably a third of the squad, have done things where they give a presentation on Zoom, and they will give it for the whole squad. But like in some, like I will just pick up all the slides in some bonus material. Like one of the most important things is that we get the athletes to think about is speed control. So it's kind of like, this is traffic lighting, and by another name. So it's doing the right thing at the right time. And so this is something that one of our sports psychs that we work with kind of gave to the athletes that I really like. Just like, imagine you're driving, you've got 3 pedals in front of you, and it's, everyone likes the accelerator. That's the green traffic light. That's running really hard. That's great. Everyone loves that one. And we all recognize that there are times when you've got to slow down, when you've got to go into the red traffic light to make that firm bit of plan, make that final picture. And the sports psych, Matilda, came up with this model of, well, I'm going to talk to the orienteers about the idea of a clutch and use the clutch to change gear. And we just found this like subtle changing language. I found this worked quite well. I mean, it's individual. So some athletes just like, it's water off a duck's back. But a couple of athletes like this really chimed with, and then you can start using this language with them. It's like, think about adding control, like use the clutch pedal. So it's got, the way to describe this is, we've all been orienteering, and you get to that point where you're kind of like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'm in contact, and you're just a bit like, you know when you're winging it. You're a bit like, I should have done something, and I haven't. So it's like, I haven't looked at the next beacon. I didn't take a careful enough bearing. I just sort of like looked at my compass in a half-assed way, and I'm just sort of going in the general direction. And it's, you can wing it for so many controls, and sometimes you'll just see the chi, or you'll see the next feature and you get away with it. But over 20, 25 controls, you can't wing it all the way, and you will make a mistake. So a lot of mistakes come from just not doing the right thing at the right time, and by missing steps. And so this idea of adding control really appealed to a couple of athletes, because rather than talking to them about, when you don't feel in control, slow down, read the map, that language wasn't really working, because it feels defensive. It feels like telling someone to slow down when they're just like, I won't be running. But just, it's the same, it has the same result, but talking about adding control, it's something like you can do proactively, it's something you can do aggressively. And so this is just a kind of long-winded way of saying, it's like, you got to know your athletes, and you've got to have some different tools. And when you've run out of tools, you go to the sports psych, you go to somebody else, you have a chat with another coach, and you try and think of another way to help that athlete kind of like get around that roadblock and think of a different way of how they can approach what they're trying to do.
Excellent. Thank you very much again, Tom. This is the final call for the questions, so I'll start my little wrap up, but if anybody does have any more questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or Q&A quickly. I'd just like to thank you again, Tom, for such a strong detailed presentation. It's really good to have a session that does cover the performance side and the coaching of that as well, because it's definitely one of the hardest jobs, coaching, for sure. That's why I'm an official. So it's definitely something, definitely such a brilliant skill set to have. And it's been a really brilliantly informative session. I can't see any more questions in the chat at the moment, so I will properly wrap up. So thank you all for attending this evening. It's been really good to see so many faces here again this evening for the penultimate session of the development conference. So the final session, which will be happening on Thursday, the 1st of February at the usual time of 7 p.m, is the British Orienteering Insurance Policy, which may be somewhat of a hard sell, but for all clubs, naturally, its safety is paramount. And unfortunately, under that does fall some of the technical insurance policy parts as well. So it will be a good informative session on all the updates that are important for clubs. And I hope to see a lot of you there to celebrate the last session of this. On top of that, starting next week for anyone to attend, we have the major events conference, 3 sessions, one each Monday, coming over the next few weeks. So apart from that, I will end the session. The YouTube link will be sent out tomorrow along with the review and feedback form. And if you have any more questions that come to you in the middle of the night or before tomorrow or even in the coming weeks, then feel free to get in touch with myself, with Howard, or with Tom, and I will share Tom's email now. I'll pop some links into the chat where you can see all those email addresses as well as the links to the conference YouTube playlist. And I hope that everybody has an excellent evening. I can see some great feedback coming in from the chat. Thank you, Judith, Hillary, and Hillary again, for the well wishes, and hope you all have an excellent evening. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.